Welcome to the Hidden Orchard podcast, a radical exploration of spirituality, science, and the Bible from a Jewish perspective. Each week we'll look at a new topic and dive deep into the texts that inspire and enrich our lives. So whether you're a seasoned expert or just curious about a topic, there's something for everyone. So sit back, relax, and we'll get to today's episode in a bit. But first, if you haven't done so, visit thehiddenorchard.com and subscribe. It's free, and you'll receive access to content and weekly emails. There you can also subscribe for a paid membership and get access to everything on the site and be the first to hear about online study opportunities where you can meet and interact with other people on the journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have an idea for a topic, reach out to me at thehiddenorchard.com. Now, let's get to today's episode. When Paul's letters are read through the lens of Christian doctrine, it's easy to view Paul as decisively and intentionally detached from his Jewish past. Consequently, much of his works are read through a kind of distortion. But what if some of these pivotal and even controversial passages of Paul are actually Jewish in origin, rabbinic, built upon a different set of assumptions? What if Paul's views of Jewish and Gentile distinction aren't such a radical departure from tradition, or a license to kickstart a new religion, but an affirmation of rabbinic eschatological outlook? To understand this, let's take a look at Paul's influences. Though Paul apparently received his rabbinic education through the Pharisaic school of Hillel, he would have been heavily influenced by the teachings of the school of Shammai. Both perspectives are reflected throughout the epistles. Numerous references in the New Testament tell us that some of the Pharisees were genuine followers of Jesus. To me, this suggests a kind of fluidity in identity within the boundaries of Jewish expression. One did not have to undergo a formal conversion to move from one school of thought to another. But the shift from Gentile pagan to follower of the Jewish Jesus, that was massive. And as we've covered before, Jewish conversion was a valid and time-tested approach to helping the Gentiles navigate this magnitude of life change. To do it without conversion was not so easy. There was no practical precedent for this, not enough to navigate the troubles and issues of everyday life. This is why so many in the New Testament sought to convert the Gentiles coming into the movement. This is the foundation for a controversial passage that we're looking at regarding Paul's instructions for Gentiles and Jews to remain distinct in the synagogue communities. In short, Jews should not become Gentiles, which seems obvious, but also Gentiles should not seek Jewish conversion. This is commonly referred to as Paul's rule. Paul's rule is a scholarly term. It's not in the Bible, but it describes Paul's instructions found in 1 Corinthians 7:17 through 24. And the passage says, "Only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him, and to which God has called him. This is my rule in all the congregations." And Paul goes on with a little more detail, but most people might be familiar with this passage because it seems to be a massive departure from the Jewish tradition. For much of the church's history, however, these words equated to the collapsing of the Jewish distinction and the abandonment of Torah observance. This interpretation has also led to a new paradigm, perhaps multiple, paving the way for replacement theology and generally a lot of confusion. But when we read this idea through the Jewish tradition, Paul's controversial words take on a different possibility. Again, not as a rejection of Jewish identity, but a reflection of a rabbinic belief about the Messianic kingdom. Paul's views seem to stem from his beliefs about the arrival of the Messianic era. Paul believed he was witnessing its arrival in his time. He wrote, "Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instructions, on whom the end of the ages has come." And that's in the same letter, 1 Corinthians, verse 10-11. And in Romans 13 he says, "You know the time that the hour has come for you to wake from sleep, for salvation is nearer to us now than when we first believed. For night is gone, the day is at hand." And many more passages like this indicate that Paul really believed the Messianic era was beginning in his time. Much of what Paul taught should be read with this sense of urgency, weighted with this understanding of his belief. He believed his generation was on the doorstep of the redemption, and the transition was already underway. Given this, It's possible he did not think conversion was necessary, or that they even had time for such a formal process, which could take a few years to complete. Not moving Gentiles towards conversion, but allowing the Gentiles to remain in their state indefinitely and as equal heirs, that was radical. He may have had a different rationale, however. Interestingly, Jewish tradition teaches something similar about the Messianic era. In times of Israel's wealth and success, the sages taught conversion may have been for the wrong reasons, to receive some kind of a benefit. Prospects for conversion would lack an understanding of covenantal responsibilities and may have had little intention of observing the mitzvot. They may have wanted to convert to a better economy, and this is the case in the times of David and Solomon, as Talmud Tractate Avodah Zarah teaches. At certain times in Jewish history, in other words, it was so advantageous to be among the nation of Israel that it cast a shadow on one's sincerity when seeking conversion. The rabbis teach something very similar about the Messianic era. They taught that conversions will no longer be permitted when the Messiah arrives. And this is again Avodah Zarah 3b, and it says this: in the future, the Gentiles will come to convert, but the Holy One, blessed be He, says to them, "You are coming only for the benefit of the days of the Messiah. One who did not anticipate my kingdom before will not be accepted now." This doesn't reflect exclusion. It means that once the Messianic era arrives and the truth of God and His Torah are universally revealed, the cost of belief disappears. Conversion should be an act of courage, even defiance to the ways of the world, a means of bringing Hashem into the different corners of the world in which we live. This actually requires idolatry and falsehood to still be possible. Hence, conversion would be super easy, super simple, especially when Messiah arrives. Maimonides expands on this in his Mishneh Torah, explaining that in the Messianic age, the world will come to know the truth, and there will be no more tests of faith. And though it's a debated issue, the sages discuss, as do many rabbis through history, what will the Messianic era look like? Will Gentiles be made to convert? There are some readings that seem to indicate that's the case, and there are some that indicate that no, they may not. And of course, it's an ongoing debate. But to me, it seems conversion will no longer at least carry the same merit as it does in our current time, when being Jewish is not exactly popular. So for Paul, utilizing the normal pathways to Jewish life in converting may have signaled a rejection of his belief in the arrival of the Messianic era. The problem is that his timing was off. And it leads us to ask the question, would Paul have made the same decision had he known the Messianic era was still thousands of years away, and that his rule would contribute to the spark of a new religion? I don't know. As a result, we now have new problems to contend with, some of which come through Paul's words, particularly Paul's rule. Christians are not likely keen on the idea of incorporating Jewish conversion into the realm of possibilities, and much of the Jewish world is utterly unprepared for the onset of the Messianic era when the Gentiles come to learn Torah. The Messianic Jewish movement has potential to bridge the divide, but it also has potential to make matters worse, and in some cases it does, blurring the practical lines between Jew and Gentile, not making roles, purpose, and covenant clear, and sidestepping serious discussions on these issues. Yet the prophets speak of the Gentiles eventually coming to take part in Shabbat and Sukkot and other Jewish observances. How do we get there from here? While there's no way to know exactly what Paul had in mind when he wrote these words, reframing his teaching and his context in his belief in the Messianic era suggests that he might have carried forward an idea taught in the Jewish tradition. If this is the case, it lays the groundwork to carefully reconsider Paul's rule and its implications in our time. That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this topic. Remember, you can find more information at thehiddenorchard.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. We don't really engage in marketing, so it's word of mouth and references like that really help spread the word. Also, I want to say thank you to those who subscribe to the site and those who support the Hidden Orchard Project financially. Without you, it wouldn't be possible, so thank you. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.